Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where in the world you are tuning in from. And having seen the speaker list, and indeed the attendee list, I know we really do have global coverage and different time zones on this webinar, which is no surprise because of the topic that we're going to be talking about. I suspect most, probably all of us end up having to connect with stakeholders in our work. And stakeholders are great. Stakeholders are absolutely the source of our knowledge, but it can be tricky to create deep connections with them. So I'm really pleased to say the topic we're going to be covering in this BA community webinar is how to create a deeper human connection with our stakeholders. And I'm really pleased to say we have two fantastic experts with us to talk about this topic today. So first of all, we have Dr. Liz Calder. Now, many of you will know Liz from her blogs or from her presentations. But Liz has a fantastic range of experience across a whole range of domains as a senior business analyst, but also has this brilliant ability, I find, to bring in different topics like cognitive bias into our work as BAs. And I think that's a great thing to bring those sorts of questions to us. So thanks very much for being here today, Liz.
Thank you.
And we also have Kathy Berkidge. And Kathy, many of you will have seen Kathy present or will have read one of Kathy's articles. Lots of experience in the agile and business analysis space. But I think, well, what I know you for, Kathy, is bringing mindfulness into the sort of awareness of us as BAs. So again, thank you very much, Kathy, for being here today. I guess I was going to say this morning, but this afternoon or this evening for you, probably. So
it is 9 p.m. here, 9 p.m. and the sun's just set. So go Melbourne, Australia. Thank you for having us both, Adrian. So glad to be part of the BA community once again.
You're most welcome. You're most welcome. And before we kick off, a few things to mention. If you are attending live, do feel free to post some stuff in the chat. You might want to say where you're from so we can see how global the reach is. Also, we will be taking questions and answers as we go through. So do type in the Q&A panel and we'll pick up as many questions as we go along. The other thing I wanted to just show you very briefly before we start, and I will put a link to this in the chat in just a moment, is the Mural board. So you should be seeing my screen with a Mural board there. As I say, I'll put the link in the chat in just a moment. And the idea here is you don't need to register, you can just enter as a visitor, and you'll see that you can double click and add notes. And I thought it'd be really cool if we do some sort of collective note taking. So when Kathy or Liz says something that really resonates with you, you can add a note of that. And then, we've got something else to share afterwards as well. You'll also find handily over on the right hand side there are links to connect with Kathy and Liz and a few other useful hyperlinks there as well. So do make use of the Mural board. I will just pop that link into the chat there as well. So fantastic. Okay, well, let's kick off. So lots of topics for us to talk about. And I wanted to start with this idea of cognitive biases because, I mean, Liz and Kathy, I know when we were playing around with the abstract, when we were talking about this topic, that was one of the themes which really sort of jumped out. So I suppose my first question is, how would you describe a cognitive bias to someone who's never heard the term before? And why would that matter to BAs? And I suspect, Liz, this is probably one you'll want to jump in on first.
It is, thanks. So yeah, a cognitive bias is really a way that our brain has of coping with all the information that it gets thrown at it on a daily basis. I mean, we all know that we have to deal with so much information during our day. We've got our emails, we've got our phone notifications, we've got people talking to us, we've got cars driving past as we walk down the street. We are managing and having to make decisions on loads and loads and loads of information every day. And but while we have all this information, we might not actually have all the information we need. There will be gaps in that information, but yet, somehow we still have to make decisions based on this. I mean, I remember silly things like when you're overloaded with information, you can't make a decision. I was going to buy some new washing powder in the supermarket because I'd run out, but all of a sudden there'd been this new development, this new line, and there was, what felt like hundreds and hundreds of new varieties for me to choose on. And I'm going, well, how do I choose? Now, that's a minor decision you have to make. But your brain still has to process it. And the brain is actually fundamentally a very lazy piece of meat. It takes a huge amount of energy for the size of it. And what we do, our brains do, is they try and minimize the amount of effort that we use to make decisions for our daily lives. So what we have in our brain are these shortcuts or heuristics. So these are basically things, when we see a pattern, when we see something familiar, our brain makes a decision for us without even being aware of it, just to help us through the daily life. They're kind of, they're shortcuts that get us from one end of the day to the other. And the ones that are specifically cognitive biases are those that if you had time to think all the way through all the choices you had, you probably wouldn't come up with the decisions that your cognitive bias will drive you to. So, for often when you are making decisions, you'll pick on a solution that you've heard before because you're familiar with it. You don't go through and weigh up the options of everything open to you. You go, that one's familiar, I'll go with it, it's good enough. And these are survival mechanisms. They're part of the human brain. They're there from birth. It's not something we learn altogether. Some of them we do learn, but some of them, they're just in our brains. And, it's not just humans, animals have them as well. So they're there to help us make quick decisions on a daily basis. And we use them when we haven't got enough information or we can't understand what we're seeing. We make these good enough decisions.
Yeah.
And where they matter as a business analyst is that these are fine for daily life, but a project isn't daily life. It's you're doing a longer term piece of work. You need to weigh up all the factors available to you. So we have to be aware that if we've got any of these kind of instinctive, quick decision making, that we're not letting those override what should be actually a strategic decision.
It's really interesting as you were speaking, Liz. I was thinking about this on a number of different levels from a business analysis perspective. I was thinking, oh, isn't that really interesting? Because I'm guilty, I know, of having favourite techniques that I go back to time and time again. And that's probably an example of a cognitive bias, a heuristic that is, become ingrained. And then I was thinking about, those projects where it's like, oh, we must have a CRM system because everyone has CRM systems, so let's go and buy a CRM system. Can we have a CRM system type of project? So you've got that type of thing happening. And I was also thinking about how almost bias in a discriminatory way could potentially creep in terms of like service design, that things are designed in a certain way to the exclusion of some groups or vulnerable groups just because people they're not being represented type of thing. Am I right in thinking it's actually a really, really broad topic?
It is a really, really broad topic because it's about our whole survival areas. And you're right, there's a whole load of biases around our group behavior, whether you're in a group or whether someone is not in your group, and how you behave towards them is differently because you trust your safe group more, and the others are unknown, and you tend to treat them as an amorphous mass. So, group behaviors are key. And actually that one about we must have a CRM system, that is a classic one with the conjunction fallacy, where the more you know about something, the more true you think it is. So if everybody's talking CRM systems, you think it must be better just because you've heard more about it, not because you've actually weighed it up against the other possibilities. It's just, I've heard of it, therefore it's good. That's such a challenge for business analysts, where you've got to go in and persuade people otherwise.
Yeah, indeed. And I see in the chat, Elizaveta's put, I think, a really brilliant comment, which is those cognitive biases sound like basic firmware in our brains. I mean, that's
Lovely way of putting it.
a really elegant way of putting it, isn't it? So, Kathy, would you add anything to what Liz has said there about cognitive biases and or how it relates to our stakeholder relationships?
When we have cognitive bias, when we talk about these almost semi-automatic perspectives or habits of mind, habits of thought, preferences, all of that stuff, when we are going in and meeting a stakeholder, we're actually not seeing them clearly who they are. We're dragging into the picture this baggage of cognitive bias to some extent. Now, not all of it is bad, and as Liz said, cognitive biases are there to help us survive in this world of information overload. But when we are working as a business analyst and we are on a project, we don't want these cognitive biases, really. We want to be able to see the best solution, absorb all the data, not skew it with our preferences. Like, for example, hearing you guys talk, I've come from a technical programming background. I was a database person before I was a BA. So everything for me is a technical problem, I go straight into the technical solution. Whereas somebody else who might be more project management might be looking at it from a risk point of view. So when we're working with our stakeholders, we need to be able to see them and the work that we're doing with them clearly and objectively without this subjectiveness that cognitive bias can easily skew our perspective. And that means that we'll miss things, we'll make bad decisions, or we'll not see the full picture and perhaps miss a critical piece that can completely change the requirements, the solution, or in fact make a project be rendered useless, because that can happen too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose that brings us on to the next thread, because I mean you're absolutely right. Of course, we've probably all seen situations where, I mean, it's that corporate buzzword, isn't it? A suboptimal solution has been chosen. We all know what that means when a suboptimal solution's been chosen. But like, how do we work with our stakeholders? Because that I liked when you described it as baggage, right? Because that's how it feels sometimes, isn't it? You kind of bring the baggage, like, oh, that person, he or she, they're of this type of discipline, therefore they're going to be a real pain to work with. We've probably all had that kind of. How do we get beyond that? How do we get beyond the bias? I mean, any tips on that?
For one thing, if we're not aware that there's a bias to start with, we're basically walking in blind. So of course, because I'm a mindfulness person, mindfulness for me is all about awareness. And it's not just about, sitting on a cushion in the lotus position. Mindfulness is a moment by moment proposition where we are fully aware of what's happening, not just in our outer world, as far as sounds, sights, what's happening with our stakeholder, picking up on what might be going on with them, but importantly, what's happening in our inner world, what's happening with our thoughts. Are we able to shine a light into what our thought mechanisms are and perhaps pick up, this is my cognitive bias for databases or CRMs or the colour blue. Don't even start the colour blue. So I'm obsessed. It's not good. So we need to be able to say, hey, I'm seeing this through the lens of a cognitive bias. Now, it helps me outside, but it's not going to help me here because I may miss something. I may not see the full picture. So that mindfulness aspect is just literally being able to pause and stop and look and be aware and really become aware in this open and clear way, not in a bad way, not in a negative way, because it's not negative. It's just literally, it's like shining a torch into a dark corner. There's nothing inherently wrong, just that suddenly you've illuminated something you previously didn't see. Yeah. So that's how I view mindfulness, is that awareness, so we can sort of go, I see cognitive bias, we're going to come back and see this a bit more objectively now. Thank you.
It's interesting, and just before I bring Liz on this, what I was imagining there, I tend to think in metaphors and pictures, as you've no doubt realised. But when you were mentioning the torch, I was thinking it's interesting, isn't it? Because as human beings, we can only look in one direction, and there's actually a cost of looking in one direction, because when I'm looking this way, I'm not looking that way. So that metaphor with the shining the light on, it's almost about saying, well, you know, if you're driving a car, don't just look like this, you know, look like that type of thing. It's about maintaining that awareness. So fantastic. So, I mean, Liz, anything you'd add to what Kathy was saying there about pausing, reflecting, really looking at the situation and monitoring our thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely agree with that, and that's actually why, you know, Kathy and I have kind of come together on this subject, because in order to deal with cognitive biases, you have to be aware of them, because they're so ingrained in us. They're something that we don't easily see ourselves, and you have to, you know, be aware of it. Think of the conclusions. Think of the possible ways out, and that, you know, that mindfulness approach really gives you that technique to start to investigate what's happening here, which biases might be at play. If I know they're at play, are there things we can do about it? Because the way we understand how our brains work has changed so much over the last few decades. It used to be this kind of thing as, you know, we're all little computers. You put information in and you'll get these answers out. And that's, you know, we have to accept that we are not fully rational in every situation. We are predictable in many situations, predictably wrong, but, you know, we are not always going to come out with the right answer unless we really give ourselves that technique and space to make those decisions. But understanding what cognitive bias is at play really help you then pick other tools and techniques in order to try and deconstruct those. So if we know that, you know, virtually everybody has that confirmation bias, you know, I like that, therefore I will see that wherever I go and ignore anything I don't like. The brain just does that. You know, somebody mentions something, you know, a cook on television, and all it seems like suddenly all the programs are all about them. No, they're not. You're just noticing them. Your brain is confirming it. But if you know that's kicking in, you can start to build in other techniques into your workshops and into your discussions with people, into that understanding to start to overcome that. So it's that balance of really thinking, but also giving you a framework of things to think about.
Mm. Yeah, and it's interesting because I remember, because, you know, humans not being calculators, not being computers, it's very true, isn't it? We're not rational economic. We don't act as the economic textbooks or some of the economic textbooks would necessarily have us believe, or not individually at least. And I remember a book, Predictably Irrationally by Dan Ariely, I think.
Yeah,
I'm sure you've read. I'm sure you will have read. But that's I mean, that's a good question. I mean, what would be your go-to like intro book for a sort of practitioner to go and look at? Would it be something like Predictably Irrational, or?
Yes, yeah, that's a good one. I would actually go to Daniel Kahneman's Thinking Fast, Thinking Slow,
yes,
who was really one of the original proponents of the cognitive bias thoughts and experiments. And, you know, although he was an academic, that book is really very accessible. And I have it in paper and I make notes in it, and I have it in my Kindle and I read it whenever if I'm going somewhere, or if I remember reading it, it's there to search. It's a really, really useful book.
Yeah.
But actually, if you just want to read, I find a really nice light one is the behavioral economics book, and I can't remember who that's by now, but that one came out a few years ago that just kind of gave that overview of high level ways that you're right, we don't behave like the economists say we should. So that was a nice light way in, that one.
Yes, fantastic. Okay, so let's pivot and move on to talk about building deeper human connections, because of course the title of the session is Building Deeper Human Connections. And as a typical BA, I wondered if we could put some definitions around what we mean by deeper and human connection, and then how can we actually go on to achieve those. So I don't know who wants to start on that one. Kathy, do you maybe want to?
Sure. I might as well. So I suppose the first thing is where we started talking about this, and Adrian, I think it was you and I who started talking about it, and Liz and I have talked about it, that when we look at stakeholder engagement and we look at the tools and techniques that are available, we plan it, we analyse it with these tools that are very transactional and very impersonal almost. They kind of, not only that, they're very subjective. I mean, not so much racy, but when we think of the Menendlo matrix with power interest, I mean, who's to say that we're not putting cognitive bias on that just to start with? Nevertheless, but when we look at the different tools and even what's in our good friend the Babok, there's not a whole lot around it, except for we should plan it, we should monitor it, we've got to look out for conflict and stuff. And I thought, well, that's great, but there's something deeper here we need to look at, because after all, stakeholder engagement is a human-to-human thing. It's not a transaction. We're not processing a piece of data in bits and bytes. We are humans with the full gamut and range of human thought, experience, emotions, and feelings. Work or not. I know that's shocking to some people, but we're still human at work. Just because we're working doesn't mean we don't have feelings and all the rest of it. So when we think of building building stakeholder engagement, it's all about building relationships. So when we're building relationships, it's important that we are aware of what we're bringing to the table, including our own cognitive bias, but we're also aware perhaps where maybe our stakeholders have got some cognitive bias. So it's all about making sure that we're keeping ourselves aware, open, not jumping to conclusions, so that awareness and that mindfulness can really help us make sure that we aren't perhaps blurting out things like a knee-jerk reaction, and instead being more calm and considered and clear about what we're saying, how we're saying it, and how it might be perceived.
Yeah. And again, that's interesting, because that strikes me as something where I suspect many people have had to build in a don't immediately reply to the email. You're going to reply in not the best way, right? It's that reflect, that person probably hasn't sent that email to annoy me, even though I'm very annoyed by it being received, type of thing. So sort of understanding, thinking about our biases, but also their biases. That's a really interesting perspective as well. So, I mean, Liz, anything you'd add there?
Yeah, and I think there's definitely something here about understanding where your stakeholders are coming from, what matters to them, and the other influences they have. And often, there's things like what we mentioned it earlier, in-group bias, where we trust the people in our own group and what they're trying to achieve, and other people we view as slightly amorphously and different. So let's be aware ourselves. How am I treating this stakeholder? Are they part of, am I including them in my group, or am I actually viewing them as other? For the people that are working with us, what is important to them? What is important to the people around them? And I think understanding these intrinsic drivers of how people's brains operate, so we don't like change. We like things to stay the same because it's safe. We have to help people with that. We build a lot on our previous experience. There's a lovely cognitive bias I like, called the IKEA effect. Whereas basically, if you have built something, then your attachment to it becomes so much greater than its actual worth, because I'm never getting rid of these shelves. They might wobble like you don't know, but I built them and I love them. but where that hits you is often, say, if you're in systems, if somebody's been really, you want to replace one system with another. If someone's been really involved in the development of the previous system, they find it really hard to think logically about the balances because it's theirs. And you've got those sorts of things to overcome. And, you know, I'm sure we've all been on projects where this dreadful, dreadful system that needs replacing now suddenly becomes the most wonderful thing on earth. And this new thing you're designing is going to come nowhere near it. And those are really frustrating when you're a business analyst on a project. But that's, you know, that is people tapping into those biases around what makes them feel safe and what makes them feel good. So really starting to understand people as people is so important. We're not just a set of power and interest, and those people down in that bottom corner don't really matter. We are individuals, and if you don't have that deeper relationship, you will come up with problems later that then need dealing with. That is where a lot of projects founder.
Really interesting. And if we think about depth, again, I'm thinking about an iceberg. And, you know, and I know that's a metaphor that's used a lot in the stakeholder world as well. And it almost sounds like, in terms of depth of relationship, we're talking about here saying, well, don't just address what the person is saying, actually get to know them well enough to know why they're saying what they're saying, and, you know, why they're saying what they're saying type of thing, because they might be saying that replacement system is awful, but what they're meaning is, I feel very threatened by something which is new, whereas I felt quite safe with the thing that I helped specify 20 years ago type of thing. Is that a sort of fair statement, would you say, Liz?
Exactly. Yes. Yeah.
So
and of course, you know, the last person to see somebody's biases is this person who's showing it. Who's that? You know, we really can't see our own biases. Everybody else is biased. I am perfectly rational, thank you very much. It's everybody's way of working. So, you know, you then have to find a way to explore that issue differently. And this is where, you know, we've got, you know, the whole BA toolbox of different techniques, but you really then have to do that consideration of, what is it I'm hearing? What is it I'm seeing? What could they be thinking, to start really probing those sort of issues and stop seeing them as somebody trying to be difficult, and understanding that they're part of them being human.
Yeah, so jumping ahead a little bit, actually, because on that idea about awkward stakeholders, and it's interesting, isn't it? Because that in itself is arguably, it's putting a frame on something. It's saying that stakeholder is being awkward, but that stakeholder is probably being very rational from their perspective. And, you know, it's like, so, I mean, and I'll put this I'll put this one to Kathy first, and then we'll come to you, Liz. But I was thinking about like techniques. If you're in that situation where someone is being very resistant to change, or they're appearing to be resistant to change, we sense that there's a reason for it that's a good reason from their perspective. The change is perhaps going to happen, right? It's going to happen. What I mean, are there any tools, techniques we can do to help people become more okay with a change?
Again, this is where the human connection comes in, because I don't see that there is some magic wand that we can suddenly wave. I think it requires empathy, deep empathy, beyond just, oh yeah, they're scared of change. Oh yeah, they're not confident with the new interface, or they're so attached to the old one, or, you know, they're older and perhaps less with the new technology, which are all perspectives or some sort of opinion that we might have formed. We need to kind of really say, hang on, what's really going on with them? And seeing it like the iceberg. I really enjoy that metaphor that you've used, because on the surface they're going to probably say, yes, I'll be fine. But we know that deep down they might be grumbling, and there might be side talk and whatever else. So that empathy, you know, it's beyond just understanding. It's that real ability to truly walk a day in their shoes and see things from their perspective. See what it is that is frightening them, where that negativity, that resistance is coming from. And only once we understand what that is can we seek to address it. Until we know that maybe they've had a bad experience, and we can say, well, you know, what can we do to reassure them? Maybe they need a little bit more training, maybe it could be some more consultation, some more walkthroughs. Perhaps there's something we might be able to come up before the system's even built to find a way that, hey, if we really listen to what their concerns are, we might be able to identify requirements which will perhaps make it an easier transition for them and perhaps a whole swathe of other stakeholders too. So for me, that empathetic concern, that real ability to lose and drop our own perspectives, including our own cognitive bias, and perhaps be able to, once again, going back to that, understanding what their biases are, what their history is, what their concerns are. And that means also truly listening.
Yeah.
And that's something that sounds easy, and we say, yes, we listen, but we really need to seriously listen to understand. And that means truly being open and truly putting everything aside, a bit like dropping all those bags and opening a window and seeing things clearly, and hearing them for what they're saying. And that awareness might come in to be able to pick up when their voice is slightly elevated, or perhaps they're looking down or something. Because when we are truly listening with as much, you know, again, these devices don't help with the full gamut of what's the human body language, but we can pick things up more because we are more in tune, we are more aware, and therefore we're more able to address those concerns.
Yeah. A lot of it, a lot to sort of unpack there, and I think one thing that really struck me when you were speaking there, Kathy, that expression of, you know, walk a mile in their shoes, I think is a really powerful one, and that empathy. And I remember, I think it was Rachel Drinkwater once said to me this expression I'd never heard before, which was, actually, it's not just about walking a mile in or walking a day in their shoes. It's ask them to show you their blisters, right? Because the thing is, their shoes might fit you, but their shoes might not fit them. And I thought, isn't that interesting, right? It's about understanding the pain of the current situation, what's good and what's bad, and how whatever change we're pursuing could help them. And as you say, Kathy, about sort of, you know, understanding their requirements, maybe we can give them some quick wins and so on. So Liz, anything you'd add?
Yes, I mean, I was listening to Kathy there, and I was thinking, actually, this is really the how to do that very old-fashioned BA concept of requirements elicitation, as opposed to requirement documentation. Because all too often, and I mean, our stakeholders often go into this, right, here's my shopping list, this is what you're going to deliver me in this system. And actually, we all know that's, you know, give us the problem, not the solution. We've got all these, you know, phrases that we can use that we know how we're supposed to get to the answer. But this really deep understanding what it is that your stakeholder needs, and, you know, these ways of getting there, enables you to actually bring out what it is they need rather than what they want. Because there's nothing that a stakeholder gives them confidence more than you identifying a requirement that they didn't even know they had, that makes their life easier. And those are normally picked up from really just understanding where their pain is, where their blisters are.
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing that I'm sensing coming through here is, because we've talked about different cognitive biases, we've talked about that sort of iceberg metaphor and getting that deeper connection. One word that sort of springs to mind here is like the idea of perspectives. And, you know, perspectives is, again, a bit of a loaded word, because there are certain techniques which will help elicit perspectives. But if we talk about it in a more general term, I mean, to what extent do you think it's important to understand the perspectives of different stakeholders, and also how could we go about doing that? Any sort of tips or techniques? So Liz or Kathy, whoever would like to jump on that one first.
Kathy, do you want to jump on that one?
Sure. Once again, sometimes the easiest way is to ask people.
Yeah.
But you've got to ask it because it's funny, if you ask people what they think, quite often they'll tell you. So we need to be able to ask it, but we need to be able to ask it in a way that they're not going to feel threatened, they're not going to feel off guard, they're not going to feel like we're attacking them, because it can feel like that. Us BAs are known for our questioning, apparently, and so sometimes that people could feel a little bit under the microscope and feel that, wonder why they're wanting to know. So finding them out from their point of view, but then for me, that openness and that curiosity to say, well, whatever they've told us, there's something behind that as well. So how can we dig deeper? How can we hone in and say that, you know, similar to what you say, that's fascinating. Can you tell me more? Can you tell me more what you've seen, what you've heard? And really being able to be open and present with them so they are feeling comfortable to perhaps tell us why they've got that perspective, where it came from, why they've formed it. And once again, if we've got a good relationship with them, if we've built that deeper connection with them, over time, it'll be easier for us to understand them. Once again, we've got to be careful that a perspective we thought of last week, last month might have changed because, well, the world continuously changes. So keeping open to that perspective that they held previously may have changed because of any other reason. So building those connections, asking those questions, and that ability to stay present with them to find out more.
Yeah. So Liz, what would you add?
I would add that if you're aware that some of these perspectives will inevitably have come from biases, then, you know, we do have tools and techniques to overcome those. I'm thinking of a couple. First, the confirmation bias, where, you know, we're looking for a particular solution and all the information we get, you know, is built to support that. You know, that's a perspective they have, but we have to help them work through that. And there's this really handy technique called consider the opposite. So if you've got, you know, when you've got that relationship with your stakeholder, you can say, right, this is a great solution. So let's think of a handful of reasons why this won't work. And you actually get them to consider the opposite position to help them self-challenge a piece of work. And that's been, you know, you only need to come up with about 5, because if you come up with much more, it starts to look a bit silly. And, you know, you're not necessarily proving them wrong. You're helping them examine their own perspective, but with these techniques you have to actually overcome known biases. And I mean, I suppose another classic one is kind of group behaviours, the bandwagon bias. When you're in a large meeting and you're trying to get people's perspectives, but the first person that speaks is the one that drives the conversation, and then nobody will contradict them. And, you know, that's a bias that we have in order to maintain our group behaviour and our status and, you know, make sure that we're not living in a state of conflict. It's natural behaviour. But again, to help people actually bring through their perspectives, you know, we know the techniques. They're one of the first ones we learn. You know, have a quiet session at the beginning where you ask people to write down their own ideas before anybody speaks and then share them. So these are, you know, if you can understand which biases might be in play, we have techniques to kind of say, look, let's examine this slightly differently and check that we've not got assumptions kicking in here.
That's really interesting. That's really interesting, and it was it triggered a bit of a thought pattern in my head about. I ran a fully virtual workshop a while ago, and the feedback, or part of the feedback I got, was that was actually better than an equivalent workshop would have been in the real world. And so I had to follow up with a person and say, could you tell me a bit more about what you mean by that, please? And they said, well, because I've been using Mural as a shared whiteboard and we've been having breakout rooms, they essentially said, in a real world, there's always someone who has the pen who acts as arbitrator for the message of the group. And they said, in Mural, anyone can put a sticky note, and even if someone is filling the breakout room with their voice, you've got this more democratic way of communicating. I thought, wow, isn't that interesting? So maybe, and this is going on a very unexpected direction, maybe the channel with which we communicate means that there are different challenges and biases. So, for example, virtual might have some advantages over in-person, but then in-person has got some advantages over virtual. And maybe we're going to end up wrestling with all of these in this new hybrid world we find ourselves in.
Yeah, I think we are. And I think there are challenges with making sure that we get everybody's voice in virtual meetings. It's much harder than it is in physical meetings. You know, and I'm actually seeing, I'm kind of feeling, I think sometimes meeting quality has declined since we're all on Teams now, because we'd all learned how to make sure everybody's voice was heard and make sure people were considered in face-to-face meetings. You know, we've been developing those techniques over the last few years, and I think we've gone a bit backwards since we've gone virtual, and actually really have to start putting a bit more effort in to really making sure that we get all the perspectives through. We don't just take people at face value because they, this is the first thing they came out with, and that we explore things from multiple angles.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny, isn't it? On that note, and I know I am going off on a very different tangent now, but one thing I've learned over the last however many years it's been since we've been in various lockdowns is it's actually fine to leave what seems like a really, really cringeworthy amount of dead air in a virtual meeting. So sometimes if I'm asking, I make myself pause for 7 seconds, right? And I know that sounds crazy, but think about how long it can sometimes take to find, to one, think, oh yeah, I do want to contribute. 2, find the mute button. So I found myself going, okay, right. So has anyone got anything to add before we move on? 7, 6. I feel like I'm dying. 5, 4. They think I'm an idiot. 2, and then you hear someone chip in. So anyway, I digress. So I just want to do this terrifying thing that I do at this point, which is have a look. Oh no, it's fantastic. Look at the mural board. So I'll just put this on the screen. If you did join a little bit later, I will put the link in the chat as well. We've got a whole bunch of. You should be seeing the mural board on screen share now, so you can see we've got what we got on here. Reuse of existing pathways, being aware of cognitive biases. Gosh, some creativity with the shapes here. That's fantastic. Active listening. So yeah, so actually a really nice set of notes forming there. So I will share a copy of this on LinkedIn after. Also, do remember there are links to connect with Kathy and Liz at the edges there as well. So fantastic. Well, let's keep going, because a few more topics for us to cover. Just a few more minutes before we start to wrap up. So we've talked about awkward stakeholders. We've talked about tools and techniques to an extent. I know we've mentioned some tools and techniques, but other than those you've already mentioned, any specific tools, techniques that you'd recommend people take a look at? Kathy.
Fantastic, thanks. So really there are, as I mentioned, when I went looking for something beyond, because I know that when I talk to people and the topic always comes up in all of the courses, or when I'm coaching, creating connection, creating relationships, doing stakeholder analysis, planning for the engagement process. Of course, we've got flowcharts, and even when I looked up the definition, it seemed very clinical. So I was looking, and it struck me just by happenstance. I was working with a team on a lean canvas, and I thought to myself, hey, as much as the lean canvas is all around an initiative, surely we could apply it to really do that, again, going into that metaphor, that 360-degree view of our stakeholder. So looking into those dark corners and our blind spots behind us around what's happening truly for them. So by looking at the lean canvas as the layout with those 9 elements, I was able to talk through and think of, well, if we're doing stakeholder analysis beyond just power, interest, or racy, or are they internal, external, or part of the project team, what else could we want to know? So I really thought about, well, beyond just what you do on a lean canvas about a new project, a new product, imagine that you really want to deep dive into the stakeholder and how we're going to engage and how we're going to work together. So I developed the stakeholder engagement canvas, which looks very much like a lean canvas, but of course it's completely different. The only similarity is it's got 9 elements. So would you like me to share my screen to show that?
Yeah, absolutely. Please do.
Oops. Let me see if I can do that. Oh, I'm disabled. You've disabled my screen.
No, that can't be right. Hang on. Right, you should be able to do it. You should be able to do it now.
There it goes. That's okay. Technology. So you should see my screen now, and you can see there's a blank canvas there. We start off by thinking about our stakeholder name and their role. The first element is really about who are they? What's their world like? What's going on around them? Who are they interacting with? What's in their world? So we might actually, this canvas is not about us making things up and putting it on. It's all about perhaps at times talking through some of these elements in a helpful, non-confronting, aware and mindful way to ask them. So that's the first element. Then we start thinking about what their requirements are in a broad sense of what they need from this piece of work. So they might be, some key functionality. So we don't want to ignore that we are going to be looking at their requirements, but we also need to understand what are their goals? What does success look like for them? What's in it for them? What problems are we solving for them? So we really need to think about those goals and objectives and how they're going to measure success or not. It's important to understand what work we're doing together. So the nature of the work. Are we doing a big CRM replacement? What are we doing together? Is it a process mapping exercise? Is it a continuous improvement lean initiative? What is it that we're doing together? Then we need to think about what are we planning to do? So once again, we start thinking about, well, what interactions am I going to have with this stakeholder? Meetings, workshops, one-on-ones, are they coming to group activities? We start mapping out what those interactions are going to be like. Next is the outcome, and the outcome is not of the project, but the outcome of the engagement. What is the expected outcome of this engagement? Are they expecting us to furnish them with process flows? Are they just going to be signing off on things? Or are they expecting data extracts? What is the expected outcome? And of course, they might be expecting us to represent their requirements adequately for them of the new initiative process, whatever it is. The next element and the next three elements are probably the most critical ones, and that's where the mindfulness aspect for me comes in. The element to the far right there is all about looking within ourselves and saying, well, what perspectives do I have? What cognitive bias can I identify that I'm bringing to this relationship? Have I had history with this person, so I've automatically got some sort of negative opinion or positive opinion, because over positive opinion can be just as dangerous. So those first 7 elements are really giving us a clear picture of the engagement. So the last 2 elements allow us to firstly identify from all that information that we've put out there, what are the risks to the engagement, what could go wrong, what misunderstandings could there be, and then the last one is all about what practices are we going to employ to remove any of those engagement risks. Now, whilst it sounds like a lot, realistically, this does not have to be an arduous task. It might be just prompts to help you think through the various elements, and you might put a couple of sticky notes or a few words in each element, or you might find that this is going to be something really important, so you might do a much more thorough elicitation and analysis of all of these elements together.
Fantastic. Now, a question I am certain people will be asking at this point is there a way people can get hold of this picture, this canvas, Kathy? How can people get hold of it?
Just get in touch. There are a few bits and pieces online, and I can more than happily share. So if you want a copy of the canvas or more information about it, just get in touch, and I can certainly share that.
Fantastic. I love that. I love that canvas. It's beautiful in its simplicity, but it's by no means simple. You're right. It's concise and brief, but it's not simple. So Liz, anything you'd add?
No, I just want to back up Kathy's point of, we sometimes, I think, don't put enough effort into stakeholder engagement because we are worried about, all the time it will take. But if you've ever been on a project where you haven't got that good relationship, you can find yourself 6 months down the line still trying to resolve problems that a better relationship and a better understanding of your stakeholders might have got fixed earlier. So I think actually it's one of those areas where putting thought and consideration into really how to build the best relationships with your stakeholders from the get-go saves you a lot of time later, because it's always really hard rebuilding a relationship if people have entrenched themselves in specific positions. So I think, you know, that's something to really bring out, is this is a technique that saves time and helps projects go forward. But I was also really fascinated, you know, looking at that column of about me and, you know, the perceptions you bring to people, because we have this we have biases that mean we take a single characteristic of a person and apply it to everything they do.
Yeah.
So if somebody's late once, you know, we hit an error, the fundamental attribution error, where we say, oh, well, they're a disorganized person, so everything they do is disorganized, as opposed to, oh, maybe the cat fell over this morning and they, you know, or something like that. But also the halo effect, the opposite effect, where if somebody impresses us in one way, we think everything they do is wonderful, even if sometimes it's not, which is why we idolize, say, you know, some people idolize sports people who are excellent at sport, and then they're a role model. Well, actually, should they be a role model for the rest of their life because they're an excellent sports person? So we, you know, that real perspective on ourselves and what we bring is really important.
It's fundamental, isn't it? This is really, really fundamental stuff. So fantastic. Well, we're almost out of time. So just before we start to think about closing, and if you're staying online, if you're attending live, do stay to the very end. There's just a few additional links for upcoming events that I want to share with you, so you won't want to miss out on those. But my final question to you both is, what would your biggest takeaway be? So if people are tuned in here as business analysts, as change practitioners, as agile practitioners, project managers, product managers, whatever they happen to be, what sort of one thing briefly would you want them to take from this session? So Kathy, what would your biggest takeaway be?
To learn to become aware of what's happening, not just outer but inner, and be aware of what's really going on in that inner voice that can be so mischievous.
Mischievous inner voice. I love that. I love that. and Liz, what would your biggest takeaway be?
Cognitive biases kick in when, especially apply when we're doing things quickly. They are instinctive decisions we make without even being aware. So when you're making decisions, think, do I need to make this decision quickly? Can I go and have a coffee? Can I go and have a walk around the office? Can I sleep on it? Because the longer you give your brain to mull over something, the less likely you are to be hit by a cognitive bias that might negatively impact your project.
Interesting. And isn't that interesting that often the impetus in, well, most organizations, not all, but most organizations I've worked with is quick, we've got to do it quick. Everything's on fire. Even the fires are on fire type of thing. So fantastic. Well, Liz, Kathy, we could continue talking for much, much longer, but time as ever is against us. Thank you so much for taking the time to have a conversation around here. Now, I'm absolutely sure that people will want to know more about both of you. They'll want to connect, and there might be people listening in who want to do a bit of a deeper dive in some of this topic. So how can people stay in touch? How can they find out more about this stuff? So Kathy.
Of course, I think both Liz, luckily I'm the only Kathy Berkidge in the world. A lot of people are very happy about that. So both Liz and I know that you've put some links into the site and you can re-enter them. And they're also on that mural board. So do find us on LinkedIn. We are also very, very excited about our workshop, and I might let Liz talk a little bit more about that.
Yes, we are running a workshop. I've forgotten the date. Beginning of April. Sorry,
7th of April.
At the beginning of April in London. It's a live workshop where you can learn more about cognitive biases, people, the techniques you can use to overcome that, but also using mindfulness as a technique with your stakeholder engagement. So Kathy and I will be digging deeper into the specific areas around cognitive biases, people's reactions, and how you can overcome that. We'll also be looking deeper at the stakeholder engagement canvas, doing some practice sessions on that, and we will, you'll be able to practice mindfulness. So we'll be giving you those tools and techniques to enable that deeper human connection with your stakeholders, moving beyond the power interest grid, and really giving you a way of building those relationships.
Fantastic, fantastic. And isn't it nice to be able to be talking about physical in person as being an option to actually meet people again after such a long time of not spending time with people? So, well, fantastic. Well, thank you both. If you are tuned in or indeed watching the recording, do check out the course. Now, and do connect with the speakers on LinkedIn, connect with Liz and Kathy. This is one of those things that if we were in person, it'd be a warm round of applause now. And I always think like a nice virtual round of applause is to connect with the speakers, and see what they're up to. And I'm sure Liz and Kathy would be fine if people have questions for them to
absolutely
connect with you afterwards and ask them. So fantastic. Well, thank you both so much for taking the time out. Thank you also to everyone who attended live or indeed watched the recording. Just a few updates to give those of you. We have a couple of really, really interesting webinars coming up. So I'm just going to post details of those in the, you see you're getting virtual round of applause in the chat now. That's lovely. So just a couple of upcoming webinars to let you all know about. The next one is on the 24th of February, 6:30 p.m. UK time, so a slightly different time spot, avoiding digital exclusion, and we have Agnieszka talking about that. Really a topic I'm really enthusiastic about, and sort of fits in with this one in a way. And if we've got biases, we might be excluding people. So I hadn't thought about that, but that's going to be an interesting one. And then another one I am particularly excited about, not least because of the title. Let me just grab the link to this. We have The Hitchhiker's Guide to Stakeholder Management with Elizaveta, which I will just, there are too many windows, you know what it's like, too many windows, here we go. And, I mean, how could you not want to attend a session called The Hitchhiker's Guide to Stakeholder Management? And do read the abstract for that one. Read the abstract for both of them, but that one, I think they're both going to be really fantastic sessions, so do check those out. So fantastic. Thank you everyone for attending. Hope you'll be able to attend a future webinar. And Liz and Kathy, thanks again. Stay safe, everyone. And check out Liz and Kathy's session and see you soon. So bye, everyone. Bye for now.
Bye.
Thank you. Have a great day.